The New Orleans Saints have officially hired Kellen Moore as their next head coach. It's a big ad for the Saints, but a big loss for the Philadelphia Eagles. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk. On today's episode, we're going to talk about who might win the MVP in 2025 or 2026, however you want to look at it, who might win next year's Super Bowl. But we will start with the big NFL news. Kellen Moore hired by the New Orleans Saints. Before I get into it, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Michelle, the New Orleans Saints get a big ad in Kellen Moore at head coach.
And the Eagles lost another offensive coordinator.
How will they survive? We're going to throw it to the mastermind himself, my guy, Ross Jackson from the Locked On Saints podcast, to break down this news that we've kind of known for quite some time. We kind of knew it was coming after the weekend, but now obviously it has been made completely official by the Saints. My guy Ross, as he likes to do, take his time to get his point going here.
It's a done deal, fam. The New Orleans Saints have their next head coach. It actually happened. I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. I say it actually happened. It's more so that it finally happened. The New Orleans Saints, with pursuing Kellen Moore, had to wait until after the Super Bowl, after the playoffs, all this other stuff to get this done. We knew there was going to be a matter of days after the Super Bowl was done for this deal to become finalized. Now, according to reports from Ian Rappaport and others, the deal is done. Kellen Moore will be the New Orleans Saints' next head coach. He will be the next leader in New Orleans. You get a young, refreshing approach, an entirely different coaching staff, everything from the previous regime, a real separation from what was the past in order to better look ahead to the future. We'll be live a little bit later, breaking down the hire, kind of going over what the next steps are, things like that. But speaking of the future, 7-round mock draft in Kellen Moore's vision, already ready for you over at Locked On Saints.
I mean, Ross is so prepared. He's already got the mock draft ready to go for the. Listen, I like this move for the New Orleans Saints, and a lot of it is dependent to me on what their vision is going forward for the future. Are they going to continue to try to commit to this win now phase, and they're going to keep Derek Carr around, and they're going to try to add, like, are they going to go for it right now, or are they going to take their medicine like I've been talking about for 7 or 8 months with the New Orleans Saints, except that they need a bit of a refresh, they need a bit of a retool, a rebuild, whatever you want to call it. They need to go into a new phase of New Orleans Saints football, and that's going to include letting go of some of the expensive guys on their roster. I like the trade for Marshawn Lattimore, going ahead and moving on there. You move away from Derek Carr. I think there are a lot of options there. So I like this move for Kellen Moore. I like it more, no pun intended, than the Pete Carroll signing or the Liam Cohen signing in Jacksonville or the Brian Schottenheimer signing in Dallas. I like this move more than those, but my real opinion on this hire is based on what the Saints' philosophy and vision is moving forward.
I don't like the hire. Now, I don't know who I would like them to hire. I think they're in a spot right now where they
not a good cycle.
They need to miserably tank, basically, right? Their best players are their oldest players, and Alvin Kamara and Demario Davis and Cam Jordan. I mean, the spots they do have locked up, they're old. They're real old. They don't have a quarterback. Everything is getting weaker for them. They're playing in a division where, you know, the other teams are starting to pick it up. So I don't believe in Kellen Moore. I don't. I think he got hired because Saquon Barkley had a great year behind an amazing offensive line, the best in the league probably, and that's why he got hired. I cannot imagine him actually leading a group of guys. I just can't see it. I don't think he. I'm just making this all up. I don't think he's a good hire.
No, I don't think you're wrong about those things. I think if we're doing like a scouting report on Kellen Moore, I think one of the worst parts of his profile is leader of men. He's such a young guy. He hasn't done that. I mean, he was a former player, so I think he does get a little bit of that cachet with the players because he was a former player. But I think that's why my vision for the Saints is so important here, because if you're saying, hey, we're going to go get a young coach who we know may not be ready to lead a team right away, but we're going to build with that coach and let that coach gain experience as we remodel the team around what he wants. That vision I could get along with. But if you want to win right away, I think that would be unwise. And I don't think Kellen Moore is a good fit for that either. So I do agree with you, but my outlook on his potential there is based on how they want to go forward. I do want to say from the Eagles' perspective, this is something that I talked about recently. I played a video of Legacy Louie from Locked On Eagles saying that the Eagles could be setting up a dynasty here. They could repeat. Well, the problem with the leader CEO type coach is that you have to replace coordinators all the time. And the last time that the Eagles had to replace coordinators, it crushed them for a whole year. They totally tanked the back half of the year before they bounced back after good coordinator hires. Can Nick Sirianni not make a mistake year and go directly to the Kellen Moore hire? I think this could set the Eagles back quite a bit if they don't hire the right guy to take over.
And they're pretty late in their search now, right? Other people have already gotten their next OC in DC. So, yeah, losing your guy this late, I mean, because they won the Super Bowl, they're going to take that, right? But now they're late to the game of finding their next offensive coordinator, unless he's in-house, right? Unless they kind of had this planned and we're ready for this. But, yeah, I mean, this is going to be, Jalen Hurts 4 straight different OC in 4 straight years? Yeah, it's not ideal. And we saw how bad it was last year with Brian Johnson. And then it obviously was better with Kellen Moore, but also did Kellen Moore really fix everything? I don't know. Again, I just think he got very, very lucky playing with getting the coach Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, you don't want to do the thing where you give all the credit to the players and none of the credit to the coaches. The coaches certainly deserve their credit, but we cannot ignore here that the Eagles had one of the most stacked rosters in NFL history this year. We talked about the numbers last week, and I kept bringing up that number of teams that averaged less than 200 passing yards a game. This was a fully stacked roster in the way of the 2000 Baltimore Ravens and that Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that won a Super Bowl. I know that Jalen Hurts is a better player than Brad Johnson or Trent Dilfer, but Jalen Hurts really didn't have to be great in that game. He won MVP and he stepped up and he was clutch. But I think that there's 15 to 20 quarterbacks that could have won that game on Sunday at quarterback with what the Eagles had around. So to me, you look at the passing offense being 30th in the NFL, and you look at how great and special Saquon is. I don't think it's disrespectful or inconceivable to say Kellen Moore maybe isn't the reason they got back on track, and maybe just the special talent that they had is why it happened, because they still struggled mightily in the pass game.
Especially for the fact we just saw the Chargers offense struggle under him in 2023. Again, they did have injuries, a lot of them. So you can excuse him for that, fine. But, I mean, they struggled, right? And he's not going to have the same type of players that he had with the Eagles. So you can say, well, maybe the talent level that he'll be using is kind of more towards what he had with the Chargers in 2023. Yeah. And then the Cowboys offense was much better in 2023 without him as a play caller, right? I mean, they were fine from 2019 to 2022 with him, but they got even better without him. So I don't know. I don't really get why he was such a top guy. I would have thought Cliff Kingsbury would have got another shot before Kellen Moore, but it didn't go that way. So Kellen Moore, I mean, I wish the best for him, but hopefully he does well. I just cannot envision him being a good coach.
Yeah, I'm with you there. But speaking of the Philadelphia Eagles and Kellen Moore and the championship and all that, who's going to be the champion next year? We're going to go over some odds from our folks over at FanDuel to talk about who we think could bring home the trophy next. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or I'm picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. And as a matter of fact, I used FanDuel's live betting feature on Monday night when Luka Doncic debuted for the Los Angeles Lakers. Can't lie, I took the under on Luka knowing that he wouldn't play a full game. And of course, it cashed. Right now, the new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, Michelle, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Kellen Moore news, which we kind of expected, so it's not news, you could say, but still finally official. Good for the Saints, bad for the Eagles. But speaking of bad for the Eagles, let's look at who could bring home the championship next. Now, look, Michelle, I know that the two favorites are going to be the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. As a matter of fact, on FanDuel Sportsbook right now, the Philadelphia Eagles are plus 600 to be the next champion, the top odds, and then the Kansas City Chiefs are plus 650. But outside of those two, when you look at who could be the next team to win the championship, obviously you have the usual suspects at the top, like the Ravens, the Bills, the Lions. For me, out of the top teams, I look at the Buffalo Bills, who were technically in a transition year this year, moving away from the Stephon Diggs version of the team and into what the next version of the Buffalo Bills was going to be. And they still had a fantastic record. Josh Allen won the MVP, and that was during this transition. So now I think Buffalo knows what they need to do going forward and what they need to add to this new version of the team. So I'm actually going to go with the Buffalo Bills plus 750. They're the fourth best odds to win the Super Bowl next year out of the top options available. That's my pick. And I think, according to my guy, Joe Marino from Locked On Bills, that the Bills understand that they need to add more difference makers.
I think the number one priority of this team this offseason is to go get an impact defensive lineman. I said it last year. If you follow the analysis last year, repeatedly I said my biggest concern, even when people were talking about wide receivers, I said my biggest concern that this team does not have a game wrecker on this defensive line. And so Sean McDermott winds up talking about difference makers, and this is really fascinating to me. Sean McDermott said this. You need two to three difference makers on each side of the ball if you want to have a chance to get to the Super Bowl. He said, I'm not saying whether we have them or not, but generally speaking, you need 2 to 3 on offense and defense. He went back in and said, look, a difference maker is a player that's top 1 to 5 at their position, but is also selfless, that has the team first mindset. You know, obviously a talented impact player, but it is still about the team.
So there is a talented, impactful defensive lineman available, and his name is Myles Garrett. So I am going to bet on the Bills to make a splash move here on the defensive line, plus 750, fourth best odds. Give me the Bills as the team to win the Super Bowl next year.
I love that. If they were to go get Myles Garrett, that'd be great. I think every team should be focusing on the trenches. They already have a good offensive line. So, picks up the defensive line. Mm-hmm. I will say for them to truly win, I don't think you can have Khalil Shakir as your top receiving yard guy and Matt Collins as your top receiving touchdown guy, right? I get it. Josh Allen is Superman, and he can carry a team. We saw it this year to a great record deep into the playoffs with nobody. Mm-hmm. But you can't expect them to do that every year. So get them at least someone viable as a top receiver, because they don't have that right now. Now, the team I like, it's maybe I'm being a bit of a homer here with my Brock Purdy thing in the back, but it's the 49ers at plus 1,500.
Yep.
We just saw a handful of years ago them have a down year because of injuries, right? That 6-10 year after losing in the Super Bowl in 2019, they had a terribly unlucky year with injuries. After losing the Super Bowl in 2023, they had a terrible year of injuries in 2024. Yes. But right after that year in 2020, when they were down, they were back to the NFC Championship 3 straight years from 2021 to 2023. So I'm not given up on this team just because of one down year. They're going to have CMC back. They get to now face the fourth ranked schedule. They have a very easy schedule too, because they're facing the NFC South and the AFC South for their two divisions. It's a great schedule. They should have much better health, luck. And then also getting Robert Saleh as their defensive coordinator, I think is huge as well.
Well, I think if you look at the value, the Eagles are plus 600, Chiefs plus 650, Ravens plus 650, Bills plus 750, Lions are plus 1,000, and then San Francisco's all the way at plus 1,500. I think that's great value if that's the way that you're looking at it. Out of the teams that could realistically pull it off, I think that makes a ton of sense. I do want to look at a sleeper option. And speaking of Michelle being a homer, I got a great option for you for my sleeper, Michelle. The Pittsburgh Steelers plus 6,500. Here's my thought. If the Pittsburgh Steelers trade for Matthew Stafford, they're immediately closer to the group that we just mentioned rather than the group that they're with right now in the odds. The teams above the Pittsburgh Steelers in Super Bowl odds next year, the Bears, the Dolphins, the Cardinals, the Cowboys, the Falcons, the Seahawks. If Matthew Stafford was on the Steelers, they would go up into the top 10 teams in odds to win the Super Bowl immediately. So, like with the Bills and now with the Steelers, I'm going to place a bet thinking that the odds are going to increase dramatically by the time the season actually arrives. So if I'm putting down a little sleeper bet right now, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I think with the defense they have, some of the weapons they have on offense, you get Matthew Stafford, you use some of your other assets in free agency in the draft to bolster the offensive line. I think the Steelers have title contention if they can do those things.
Have fun wasting your money. They're going to make the playoffs, get killed in the wild card round. As long as Mike Tomlin's
even if they had
there,
Matthew Stafford, would you put that ceiling on him with Stafford?
They haven't won a playoff game since 2016. They had Big Ben, still good Big Ben for a couple of those years. It doesn't matter. How long has it been since they done anything? And they had Ben for how long? I think Ben was a better quarterback than Matthew Stafford. I think Stafford's had a great career, but I think Ben was even slightly better. I don't know. No, as long as Mike Tomlin's there, they're probably not going to win a playoff game. And as long as Terrell Austin is still the DC, I mean, they're not even trying. So, and he's still the DC.
Okay. So the problem is so much bigger with the Steelers that
who's Matthew Stafford going to throw to? Just George Pickens? I mean, no, this team is
get Stafford and Cup. Pickens, Stafford, Cup. Let's go. Steelers are back. But who would be your sleeper then?
Well, how deep do I have to go? Because I feel like it's cheating to say the Commanders because they're just in the NFC Championship. But they're at plus 2,400. I mean, they get to the NFC Championship with a rookie quarterback. Right. It seems like a pretty easy case there for them. You would want to say.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. The Commanders are below the Eagles, of course, below the Lions, below the 49ers, and below the Packers after going to the NFC Championship game.
Let me give you a crazy one here. The Broncos at plus 4,800.
Okay. Yeah, I could see if they added enough, maybe
they need to add some weapons for sure, a running game, but their defense is good enough. Bo Nix really outshined what we thought he was going to be. And he only had Cortland Sutton and no running game. So get him some weapons, a running game, and maybe you never know.
There definitely is room for improvement. But with that being said, let's move away from the Super Bowl and talk about MVP. And not only are we going to talk about our MVP candidates for next year and who we like, but I got just a little bit of a Rollins rant for you on this year's MVP. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, we look at Jason Tatum for more than 29 points. I'm looking at Austin Reeves for more than 20 points. The best part, PrizePicks is quick and easy. You can set your lineups in as little as 60 seconds and get fast and safe and secure withdrawals in as little as 15 minutes. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, Michelle, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We looked at the Kellen Moore hiring with the New Orleans Saints, looked at some early predictions on next year's Super Bowls, taking into account the odds here with our folks over at FanDuel. We're going to do the same thing here with MVP. Who could be the MVP next season in the NFL? Before we dive in, thanks for making Locked On NFL your first listen. Make sure that you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop as well. But Michelle, for me, I look at the MVP odds, and the number one name that stands out is Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow right now is fourth in the MVP odds. He's plus 600. And this year, he played well enough to be the MVP of the NFL, but the team just simply did not. The Bengals have missed the playoffs for 2 straight seasons now. They are going to be desperate to get back in. They're going to be desperate to make noise. I think Joe Burrow at plus 600 makes a ton of sense. And quite frankly, Burrow is going to have to step up and play his best because he is putting a lot of pressure on the Bengals organization this offseason. And my guys from Locked On Bengals talked about how Burrow used Radio Row at the Super Bowl to put that pressure on the organization.
There's a reason that despite having a plan and despite the conversations Joe Burrow has had with ownership and that the players have had with each other about wanting to stay together, that we're still talking about it, that Joe's doing this today.
Yeah.
Joe's not going through a bunch of Radio Row interviews that he doesn't have to do unless he has a reason to do it. And that is to keep that pressure up, to issue not so thinly veiled threats like you better get this done. My will is going to be publicly known. And consider fan sentiment right now, James. I did an informal Twitter poll. What's your level of confidence in the Bengals front office right now? I think 90% of the answers were low or very low. Mm-hmm. Players are going to, or not players, fans are going to be supporting Joe Burrow's side of this and the players' side of this right now unambiguously. And so he has this platform that he has. And in the past, the Bengals front office hasn't really cared.
I do think the Bengals care now. I think the Bengals are going to do what they got to do to get T. Higgins back, pay Jamar Chase, keep Trey Hendrickson, all of that, and improve the team. But if you're going to push them, and if you're going to pressure them, and if you're going to knock on that door, you better be ready when the door is answered, and Burrow better step up and have just as good of a season next year as he did this year if he's going to put all this public pressure on his own team.
Yeah, and I will say he probably wins MVP if the Bengals were able to sneak into the playoffs.
Yes.
He probably would have won it. I mean, his season was amazing. He's one of just 7 quarterbacks all time to have a season of 4,900 plus passing yards and 45 plus total touchdowns in a season. 5 of the others won the MVP that year. Mahomes in 2018 and 2022. Peyton Manning in 2013, Dan Marino in 1984. The only 2 that didn't win were Drew Brees in 2011 and Mahomes in 2022. Weirdly, both beaten out by Aaron Rodgers that year. But like Joe Burrow had an MVP type year this year. It just so happens that, you know, they lost too many games for him to win it. Yeah. I will say he only threw 9 interceptions. I felt like he fumbled a ton. So I feel like it's always so silly when we just kind of ignore the lost fumbles. He was fumbling a lot this year. That also contributed to losing some games. So I don't want to just say, well, he only threw 9 interceptions. Like he still had the fumbles, but the passing yards and the touchdowns were there. He was obviously an MVP type player. I could see him winning next year for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just, for the value, 4th best odds, it makes a ton of sense to me. Yeah. I don't think they'll be in a rush to give Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen another MVP after both lost in the playoffs to Mahomes again. You know what I mean? Well, Lamar lost to Allen, but still, they both weren't able to get to the Super Bowl when that's kind of the standard for those 2 guys. Who's an option that you're looking for as the MVP next year?
Well, I did write down Burrow as my number 1, but I do think
there we go.
It's the same way that I think the Commanders could be a Super Bowl champion next year. You got to Jaden Daniels. I mean, he was up there for MVP there for a good chunk of his rookie season. Right. And if he can build off of that, now that's really hard to do. You can't just say they're going to be better than the rookie season. We just saw it with CJ Stroud, right? We saw it with Justin Herbert. He's never been as good as his rookie season, really. So it could go down. It might not go up. But if he's able to get better and grow off that rookie season, then he's absolutely going to be in the MVP category because he already almost had 4,500 total yards and already had 31 touchdowns as a rookie. So if that increases and let's say he doesn't just have Terry McLaurin to throw to and Zach Ertz, they get him another wide receiver, the sky's the limit for him, really.
Yeah, and with Cliff Kingsbury back as the offensive coordinator, I think that's a key factor there too. And I would say that a big part of winning MVP is not only the talent and the ability to be good enough to win MVP, but also having the public narrative behind you. And he has so much public momentum with the narrative right now that I could see that happening. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, Michelle. I've been waiting to put this take out there. The season rolls so fast. It feels like it's behind, but I do got to mention while we're talking about MVP that Josh Allen 100% deserved the MVP. I hate the conversation of Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson. I just want to say this about this year's MVP and then make a larger point about the two players. Last year, Josh Allen had 400 more total yards and 5 more total touchdowns than Lamar Jackson.
15 more total touchdowns. 15 more.
Oh, is it 15 total? Hey, listen, I'm an athlete, not a mathlete. You're the data queen.
15 total more, yes.
Great. 15 total more touchdowns, 400 more total yards last year than Lamar Jackson. But Lamar Jackson's team won 13 games and Allen only won 11. So who won MVP? Lamar Jackson. So this year, everyone's posting the same Pro Football Reference stat comparison where one row is one column is stats for Lamar, one is Josh Allen, and Lamar has him beat in the stats. See, how could the other guy be? Well, if you would have done that last year, then you would be saying Josh Allen should have won MVP last year because wins aren't that important. It's just the raw stats. Well, Josh Allen had better raw stats than Lamar Jackson last year, but Lamar Jackson won more games, so he won MVP. So it's so hypocritical. You cannot say that Lamar Jackson deserved to win MVP this year and also say that Lamar Jackson deserved to win MVP last year. Those two things cannot be the same at the same time. So Josh Allen, in fact, did deserve to win the MVP this year over Lamar Jackson, even though Lamar Jackson had better raw stats. And I'll take it a step forward. Josh Allen is a better football player than Lamar Jackson, and it's not even that close. Josh Allen has 4,000 more total yards in his career. Lamar Jackson has about 2,000 more rushing, and Josh Allen has 6,000 more passing. Josh Allen has 50 more total touchdowns in his career than Lamar Jackson. Lamar has 30 less interceptions. I'll take 50 touchdowns and 4,000 more yards over 30 less interceptions any day of the week. Josh Allen is 2-0 against Lamar Jackson in their playoff head-to-head. Josh Allen has a 7-6 playoff record, a winning record in the playoffs, and double the amount of playoff wins that Lamar Jackson has, who's 3-5 in the playoffs. All of this is true while, in my opinion, Lamar Jackson has had the better support staff, the better system, the better coaching, everything. Lamar Jackson has a better environment and does less. And people will say, oh, those are the raw totals. Look at per game efficiency. Lamar is more efficient. Well, guess what? Lamar Jackson being injured and missing more games than Josh Allen doesn't make it a better argument for Lamar Jackson. That's a better argument for Josh Allen, who plays more and is available more and plays more games and starts more games for his team. So there is no argument that Lamar Jackson should have won MVP this year, and there is no argument that Lamar Jackson is a better football player than Josh Allen. Both of those go to Josh Allen. Rant over. Thank you, Michelle.
Listen, I thought you were going to come in because you told me you had a rant about Josh Allen over Lamar Jackson. I thought you were going to do the opposite, and I was going to come in and blast you like that. You just said I was going to come with all those things, so you just said everything I wanted to say. It's ridiculous Josh Allen didn't win last year. Honestly, yes. 15 more touchdowns. It's one thing to have like 3 or 4 or 5 like this year or something, but 15 more, come on, that he had last year. So it was a ridiculous award that Lamar got last year. Now you're saying, well, Josh Allen had Stephon Diggs, so Lamar did it all by himself. Well, this year he had a freaking second place offensive player of the year, right? Was that what Derrick Henry ended up being? How could you possibly win MVP when you're playing with a top guy for offensive player of the year that's not even a wide receiver? You're not even throwing to him. He's doing this separately from you.
Yes.
He's your running back and he is helping you. How in the world would you win most valuable player? If you want to just give it to the guy with the best stats, call it best stats of the year. That take away most valuable player, because MVP is not just best stats of the year. It's the guy that if you took him away from his team, they would be miserable. And guess what? The Bills, with all the rest of their starters in week 18, with James Cook still out there, with everyone else still out there, they lost to the Patriots because Mitch Trubisky was starting, right? One game without Josh Allen. And I do think, the Ravens wouldn't be as good, absolutely, with Lamar Jackson, but they're probably 8, 9, 10 win team, while the Bills would be like a 4-win team without Josh
And
Allen.
the year that Lamar Jackson missed a bunch of games when he was injured, his backup went to the Pro Bowl because the team around Lamar is so good that even a backup like Tyler Huntley, who was terrible for the Dolphins this year, can be a quote-unquote Pro Bowl player because of the Ravens setup and structure. Yeah, it's just complete nonsense to me. I had to throw my rant out there and put that on wax at some point before we move forward into off-season topics. So thank you, Michelle, for dealing with a Rollins rant there. I usually save those for my own show, but Locked On NFL, you got a good one. With that being said, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On NFL. For me, your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, my co-host, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk, as we tell you every episode, stay safe out there.
Bye, y'all.